This week, the Working Tools podcast is on the road at the Conference of Grand Masters of North America, being held right here in Seattle, Washington. So our format's a little different. We're going to have a series of short interviews with the attendees. We hope you enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
So today we are interviewing Adam Kendall, who is the president of the... So that's my first question, right off the bat. Is it Philalethes Society?
It can be Philalethes.
Philalethes
that works,
Society.
yeah.
All right. So the Philalethes Society, of which I'm a member, so I should know how to pronounce it. But Adam, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
And what is the Philalethes Society?
Well, the Philalethes Society was created in 1928 as an independent research society. So it's the world's oldest independent research society. There are other research societies, but they're attached to a Supreme Council or a Grand Lodge, or they're at, like in the case of Coronati Lodge, they're a lodge under the United Grand Lodge of England. So all dedication to Masonic research and as a scholarly bent, and not to scare anybody off. It's a serious inquest into Masonic history rather than speculation and hearsay. So the Philalethes Society was created in 1928 as a reaction to a general malaise in the United States or North America about Masonic education, particularly within, with the attitudes towards lodges and Grand Lodges, et cetera. There was not an interest. And since that time, obviously, that has changed quite a bit, and we work with Grand Lodges seeking to improve their educational repertoire. And also brothers who are genuinely interested in Masonic research. So I know I'm repping for the Philalethes Society, but there are other Masonic research societies, and I believe that just as in every trade or profession that you might find yourself in, there's usually an expectation that you subscribe to a journal or whatever, an annual anthology that comes out. It helps improve your craft or business, whatever you're interested in, and that's essentially what these organizations are. And I believe, for me, some of the biggest and brightest are Philalethes, which is a quarterly publication. There is the Scottish Rite Research Society and its annual Heredum, and then also Quater Coronati's Ars Quatuor Coronatorum, which is an annual, and it's an English lodge, but it's international in scope. Those are the big three, and then you have American Lodge of Research, you have Texas Lodge of Research. We all work together. So there's no sectarianism, and I don't think that everybody believes that, but I want to encourage brothers to consider that all of these research organizations, we're in it together and we're all friends. We know each other to some extent, some more than others, but we all tend to work together. Each of these groups has their own focus, right? Their own flavor, their own histories, but it's all Masonic research up to that point, so we try to help each other no matter what venue you're going to be in. Right.
Interesting. Yeah, that's right here in Seattle, we have the Walter F. Meyer Lodge of Research, which is not perhaps what it once was, but it is still a going concern.
I was actually working with a paper recently that used a citation, the Walter F. Meyer Lodge of Research.
Excellent. I'm a member of that too. So you said 1928, so you're coming up on 100 years. You're going to have a big party somewhere? Can I come?
Sure. Let's party right now. Let's start out. The next couple of years are going to be a lot of occasions to have celebrations. A lot of Scottish Rite temples that were built around the same time are having their centennial birthdays. Philalethes is going to have its centennial. So it's a good time to be interested in this heritage, this Masonic heritage. There's obviously Freemasonry from before, but for the most part, during the golden age of fraternalism, these temples, halls, whatever you want to call them, are now coming of age 100 years or a little bit more. And it is cause for celebration because it's part of what at least this golden age that I personally study. Some are really interested in studying the Age of Enlightenment, etc. I personally deal with post-Civil War, early 20th century. It leaves me out of a lot of symposium because the big thing is, the Enlightenment age and everything like that. That's great. But my big thrill is what I just mentioned. But yes, let's party.
So I'm trying to put this timeline in my head. So this is after there's a post-World War I membership boom,
Yes.
right? And so was Philalethes sort of a reaction to the increase in numbers of more
You would get
social
that,
bench
yeah.
Masons?
I believe that would be a fair assumption, and not to be an indictment on the whole of Freemasonry, but yes, I mean many organizations grew during this time, and new ones were created, and some were a reaction to the increase in population in the civic and fraternal clubs, or the militarization of some of them. I was reading about this one very obscure group in England that was like the Boy Scouts, but it was in reaction to the militarism of it, and they went the opposite way. It's fascinating. So, when you study Masonic history, you can't just center it in one little corner. You have to consider that every idea in Freemasonry is definitely man-made, and it's someone's interpretation of something else or a rejection of someone else's opinion, right? That's a bit glib, but it is, you have to consider a larger context. And the reason why Freemasonry as we know it today, it didn't just happen that way because it has been written. It evolves over time, that's obvious, but how does it evolve? What social circumstances will make it do that? It doesn't do it on its own. Social currents will dictate what path we follow.
Sounds like another big book that I was often quoted that's has history in that realm too and changes. But you would like to see things change, especially the ritual, right? A little more modernization.
Are you going to throw me under the bus on that? We have I would say it's a bit, except that it's real. But I am not opposed to the modernization of some of the words in the ritual. And my two co-hosts are less than fans of this idea. So I get harassed for it periodically.
That could be a heated debate.
Yes.
It's fun. It's fun.
Luckily, we're friends.
Yes.
Well, you hope so.
Yeah, exactly. So again, just to put it in a historical context, so then the next year starts the Great Depression, right? Did that influence the progress of the organization? Do you know?
Yeah. I mean, it most certainly did, because obviously lodge membership dropped, or it was very difficult. I know in the institution I work at, the Valley of Oakland in Oakland, California, we have letters in our archive of the secretary writing brothers, I know it's rough times, but you owe us money, and it's not a crass thing. It's that there's still life going on, and what can we do to help this? You see the rise in. Whereas before, with the fraternal organizations would offer benefits and burial or any kind of benefits, because before the social services or the welfare state. Fraternal organizations provided that, right? And during the Depression, people were left without. The entire system's broken. So it's stand to reason that before the New Deal, it was very difficult for these organizations to keep up their obligations to their brothers, especially when you don't have the money paid in. Some lodges, I'm sure, went dark, but many of them pulled back and just hunkered down. My valley. They finished their building in December of 1927. So it was on the heels. The end of the ride was near, right? But they maintained it. I mean, they kept about 8,000 people in that, brethren inside that organization throughout that. So
wow.
But the Depression was a big obvious marker of a downturn, right? The other ones would be, the lost generation of the 60s, where Freemasonry was perceived by the younger generation to be totally establishment, very square. And we missed out on that population. My interest, not necessarily during that era, but my interest are the whys. and the how comes, and how many other times we've missed generations. Because if we missed one, we're definitely going to miss another one. I came in, I considered Generation X, and I know that the big thrill was on the millennials and moved on to the Gen Z, et cetera. Generation X, or whatever you want to call it, there weren't a lot of us when we came into Freemasonry, so we're just generally kind of glossed over, but yet we're one of the larger populations, I suppose, that knows technology, but a world before it as well. So I think that we would have a lot of something to say about it, and why we joined Freemasonry, because my parents were in that category of the 1960s where it was swear, and it wasn't something you did. Now, why my generation in some part? What are we seeking? My parents were seekers too. How did that rub off on me? And why Freemasonry as opposed to, a multitude of other groups that arose throughout the 20th century and, got very popular in the 60s. That was kind of the last spurt, I think, of these mystical and spiritual groups. I knew people in the 70s that were part of the self-awareness groups like EST and some of the more well-known ones like Scientology, which was different than EST, of course. They all had their flavors of gurus and yogis and stuff like that. So what brings someone back to something that's traditional like Freemasonry? Now, I'm not a swear, but I do find the traditions of Freemasonry, although it's perceived as being conservative, it's not a political thing, it's not anything like that, but it has a tradition that works, it has power within it. If you interpret it as something that, it can work for you, I guess you can join anything you want, find power in anything, right? But I found that I was always fascinated with it. But so I want to know why other young people would join an organization. What generations have we missed? How are we speaking to them, right? Perhaps we missed a generation that was sort of on the tail end of like the 60s and 70s, with the book Iron John. Kind of the neo-shamanism movement. There were some older hippies in that, and some of the guys that were a little bit about my age, and they take their shirts off in the forest and and bang on drums. And I don't want to be reductive or anything, but it's this kind of neo-shamanistic movement, wearing masks and feathers, and it's an interesting concept. Now, that's a specific type of approach to reclaiming masculinity. Where does Freemasonry fit into that, too? We have to ask these questions. I know that there are occasional resurgences of men's rights movements, and some of them are a bit dodgy politically, a lot of weird, strange bedfellows. But there is a genuine concern about how men can develop properly. And I think that maybe Freemasonry, not on the whole, but maybe we should admit that we have a particular type of approach to masculinity. Perhaps we work with that within the context of our own history. That's why the understanding of history and the history of movements like this is also important. So when you come up with your plan for the world, your social experiment for the year, you have historical context, and you can approach it in a measured way rather than just being an idea or shooting from the hip, right? So there are many applications to understanding Masonic history. These are long-winded things. Way too much coffee.
So
I was imagining interviewing, but I've never interviewed. I deal with words in my head and on the screen. So in addition to Philalethes, I also edit Heritage for the Scottish Rite Research Society.
Okay.
So I do a lot of work in words, and usually other people's words. And
then I have a question for you. Why, on my bookshelf of Heritage issues, is one of them blue? Why is this?
Yeah, you wanted to know that. Do you want to know the Star Wars answer?
I don't want to get anyone in trouble.
Well, there is a real reason for that. I can give you a fantastic one, but it'll never hold up in court. It's really what it is that during the pandemic, there was a very real shortage of materials. And our printer, our printer ran out of that
burgundy color.
That burgundy. Uh-huh. Now, they had others on back order, but, because of the supply chain interruption and everything, it wasn't going to come in. And so we had to find something. Now, you could say, well, what color would you have in, a year of tragedy? You could say, well, we could have our black album. Some would say that that's too morbid. And we decided that that color blue was a very very handsome color.
No, it's not unattractive.
However,
it just sticks out like a sore thumb.
Right,
On the
those who are very claim to be OCD will be excitable about that. And it does stick out. And every collection will have an oddity in it. Now this one's a little bit too obvious, but if you were to look at a whole collection of Paradigm, you'll notice that there is a shade difference. So you can't claim that we always had that. I don't think anybody has. But if you wanted to fight on it, yes, I will concede that the blue is dramatic. But we just had no other choice, in that. And we didn't want to go that way, but we just had to. And sometimes you just have to let the world be the way it is.
Yep.
Well, and it's unique, too, because some of them were printed in burgundy, but only a special few were printed in blue, Matt. Only a special few.
Well, no, the entire run.
The whole run, okay. Oh, sorry. You could have worked with me.
It was asked of me if we were going to reprint it, and sadly, no.
Okay.
It costs a lot to produce books. It really
Sure,
does.
oh, sure, yeah.
And I know that the question could be then asked, or it could be asserted that you should go digital. Well, there's a lot of digital, but I will maintain that many of our readers, or many of our subscribers, as I say, are there's a tactile, emotional component to holding a book, and I like to be a part of that. You can get many things on the internet. I'm not a Luddite. I use things on the internet. I know how to research on the internet, and I appreciate being able to do, scan a document, OCR it, and go to town by typing in keywords, right? But the emotional relationship with the book, curling up with a good book, right? That is irreplaceable. It's a human thing. And so I like being a part of that, and so I will maintain that having it in print is necessary. If you don't like to read, it still looks good on your shelf.
There you go.
Yes. And there's something to be said about the aesthetic of the book. It's better than wallpaper.
I think one of the first books, speaking of which, that I read after becoming a Master Mason, I subscribed to Philalethes, and I got Fiat Lux in the mail. You guys still produce that? Is that I remember loving it when I first read it. It's been admittedly a few years since
I recall that too. Yeah, we haven't had that out.
Okay.
It's
a collector's item.
The quarterly model, the quarterly magazine model has really worked for us, and it has been vastly expanded under Sean Ayer's editorship. It looks so good, and the paper, the feel of it. Much different from that kind of thin, weird, glossy paper.
Yeah.
It's out of the dentist's office and into your living room on the coffee table. And so when I have extra copies or I'm done with mine, I take them to my valley. They look really good on a coffee table, and brothers do pick them up. And that's the difference between an anthology or any kind of book, which you should read books still, but there's more. Somebody's more apt in a social situation or a place that they're not going to, it's very temporary. They're not going to sit there very long. They're not going to pick up a book. They will pick up a magazine and page through it. These articles, however, are in depth and deserve to be read. But it's nice to be able to pick that up, and they usually will intrigue the person. They'll open it up thinking that they're going to flutter through it, but then they'll stop and then start looking. Usually at a photograph first, and then the text a little bit, and that's how it. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I do like that the articles are, like you said earlier, are grounded, and like even when they're talking about more mystical, esoteric-y sorts of things, there's a grounding there. There's a basis in fact. It's not the romantic woo-woo thing, or if it is,
right.
It's said out front.
Right. There is room for conjecture, but again, you have to, if you're going to assert something, you should have some sort of reference, some sort of citation to it, whether that be someone else's work or some experience, but you can't just say something and have it be true. By having a sort of historiographical approach to it, the author will show their expertise in the subject matter. So it's not just, this is what I think. They've done their research, as that. Do your research. They have really done their research and shown what others have written on it and drawn conclusions based on the available evidence. is there evidence to support something contrary or to drive it even further to be true? That remains to be seen, depending on the subject, right? But it remains to be seen, and so, but you can ask these questions finally, rather than saying, well, there must be something out there we just don't know, or I haven't found it yet. Well, you're able to develop your hypothesis and thesis and make assertions based on available evidence. Is there something else? There could be, right? But at least you have a grounding. And that's the beauty of research. And if someone writes something down, just because it's there doesn't mean maybe it's true, I suppose, even though it might be really well researched. But say you disagree. You have to say why, and then I want to see it in a rebuttal. I think too often we just let things lie, and we talk about it, we'll smack talk it even. I don't like that, I don't agree with that person. Well, okay, then great, this is a conversation, and so now you will rebut. And this is how we keep these organizations, these literary organizations, research organizations alive, by bringing forth new ideas. How do we evolve without this? It's not just written in stone on paper. Yeah, that made no sense. It's not written in stone by being on paper, asserted in a magazine or a book. It has to be questioned all the time. And research, new facts arise all the time, right? So we can expand our historical knowledge by investigating this new cutting-edge research, which is why what makes Philalethes important, because it's new writers who are discovering new things, not rehashing old things, because we find comfort in that. It's new and asking important questions. That's the only way we can increase our historical knowledge. Just like if you only read 19th century books and nothing from the 20th century, what do you know? You know what they said in the 19th century, right? And that's how a lot of our fraternal organizations are, especially in regard to ancient cultures or esoteric movements. They're sort of amberized in a particular age, and you'll cite some of the classics. I won't pick on them because they have their use, but there are new avenues of research that are even decades old, but not in the 19th century. They've gone into the 21st century.
Because sometimes you have to modernize things, even though they're important to the...
But, I see that, Dave. I will say that just because it's modernized, you have to make things understandable. But sometimes there's a tendency to say that we're a bit clever by doing so. Now, does it make sense to modernize if you lose the poetry? Now, one could argue that people don't write poetry, or they're not great orators like they were in the 19th century. And certainly, in the era where our Masonic ritual has come out of, long allocutions, were popular. These long lectures, and they were very poetic, and meter and everything. They learned how to do this in school. We just don't now. I mean, sometimes we don't use our lips to speak, right? And that becomes offensive to some people, where it sounds too above them and highfalutin and whatnot. But it's actually a beautiful way of expressing oneself. So there's a defense for that, but then there's also the danger of just confusing everybody with something that they can't relate to it. Now, I don't know which comes first on this one, because should we do it because nobody understands it before? Is that an evolution, or are we accepting our doom because we're becoming dull? Or are we just trying to keep something locked, amberized in the past because it's comfortable for us, and it just becomes too cumbersome? I wouldn't argue that the language is too complicated. It's that we don't teach people how to understand it. So if they never understood it in school, we can say, well, they never understood it in school. Why should we teach them that? Well, you can still use your degree charts that help you understand what some of these odd symbols are. You can work with them more on understanding what this means, and you kind of get an educational lesson in there. Just like when I was a teenager, you bought albums and you were introduced to other types of literature from these album covers, right? Reading the liner notes. You don't get that anymore with online music, right? So there's two arguments I see going on here, and I like to see that as a historian. These two arguments. I have my own preferences. I won't lie. I will say I do have a bias, especially in this one. I have biases in a lot of different subjects. But when I write about them as a historian, I can't do that. I have to have both sides and make assumptions on, argue both sides, to see what really comes out on top. So I can't give you any answers right now. I feel for both of you. And that's it. These conversations, these arguments or disagreements, as you know, Masons have been arguing about this since we began, right? There's always somebody that's overturning what was been done before. Someone becomes more ancient than the other.
Exactly, we need the ancients in the modern
Someone
time.
becomes,
Yes.
they're rectifying each other. They're ancienting and accepting each other all over the place. So it's always fun to read something from that time period and say, they are doing it wrong. They shall not eat out of feast table. And you read it online today. Masonry is blah, 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 blah. It's like, bro. So, but how that conversation, it's easy to complain about this stuff and find fault. We all do, because we see something that we imagined, and then we come up against the hard reality of it not being what we imagined. Is it, and sometimes there's a fight to make it what we imagine, and that's why history is important, because we can see it as it was expressed through a multitude of different people. Not just, it's not monolithic, and then we realize what we imagined is part of that continuum, but it's not the main character, right? And removing that main character, that we're small parts of this continuum, and it's not what we imagined. So I remember when I became a Mason, it was very popular to be the Chicken Little and talk about the sky is falling and Masonry is this, and this is how a lot of people got on this on the concert circuit, and speaking a lot about talking about how Masonry is doing this and that, and we feel comforted almost in our victimhood, right? Oh, we're set upon by the world, and people have TV now, and we're not doing this, and we're not spiritual enough, and men need this. But what are the answers? And you can see them in the records that are found in your Grand Lodge archives on all the initiatives that they took to save Masonry, because it wasn't what we expected, right? So, I mean, where do we go from there? I don't know, but I think I like history and I like to study history, but I can't worry about what I expect from it, because I can be disappointed every day, I suppose. But what is it now, and what pleasure do I derive from it? And that's why I'm involved in the things I'm involved with. These things make me happy, they give me hope, because I meet interested brothers that are, part of this weird little after-school club. I don't necessarily fit into the normal class picture. So I find other brothers to play chess with, and we like these things, and occasionally we can share it with others, and that's important. Now more than ever, there are brothers that are they question things, they want to know the history, and they want responsible approaches, right? They want to believe that there is a responsible approach. I mean, there are a lot of flaky approaches that somebody can believe. But you hope that you're giving responsible information. It's our duty to give responsible information. To say, hey, why doesn't society treat us like we're intelligent anymore? Be intelligent. Be a responsible adult, and don't BS people that because you thought it was so that therefore it must be true, or you heard it somewhere. And also to learn that there are responsible avenues of inquest. You can't just believe one thing. You have to look at these other sides, these other takes, become familiar with who's written on it. Not everybody's an expert in it. Some people have their own agendas, right?
What?
So I feel like I could listen to you talk all day, but we only have a 25-minute episode.
Sorry.
So I just want to make sure that we get to the. We don't usually do this, but if one wished to join the Philalethes Society, how would one go about doing so?
Well, you can go online, and we have our website is freemasonry.org.
Ooh, you got the good one. Wow.
Yeah, there's
early on.
There's freemason.com. There's a lot of them, but you can just go, if you can't remember that one, Google Philalethes Society.
If you can spell it.
Phila.
Google.
Phila. Phila. Lethes. Philalethes. I think I spelled that wrong.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Google will get it pretty
but
good.
you can go online, and it's $60 a year. We do have a special where for an extra $25, one-time fee, that you will get not only your annual subscription of 4 issues per quarter, you'll get access to our past issues from the Wayback Machine online in a PDF, fully searchable format. So that's a really good deal. So $60 for the quarterly, and an extra $25 for the Wayback Machine.
Nice.
We do have a program for lodge programs where lodges for up to 50 members be $250 for 50 members to get PDFs. That's a great deal. For Grand Lodges, we have a Master Mason program where all the Master Masons in the jurisdiction would get a 4 quarterly issues for the year to introduce them to the resource.
Yeah.
So I think that that's these are great solutions to that age-old question: what is the young Mason? Where does the young Mason go to learn?
And
we can't give the final answer, but we have a resource, and it's a quick and fun resource too.
It's a great publication, and for $60 a year, I guess I'm a life member. I guess I noticed that because I looked at it on my magazine. It says life member on the back. I was all proud of myself. But for $60 a year, it's up there with the Scottish Rite Research Society. It's just a great deal.
Yeah, and you'll find that all of these. Let me make sure that I gave the right URL, because like I said, they are similar to all the other Masonic ones out there, and I get them mixed up. Let me. Bear with me. And I'm doing this without my glasses.
Don't Google on live TV.
Now it is freemasonry.org.
Freemasonry.org.
And that'll take us to the website resides on a Shopify site. So that's how we do it right now. So, and you're right, these are it's meant to, all of these organizations are not meant to take all of your money, to provide a useful and attractive resource that you can use again and again, and you'd be surprised at the cost. I mean, why does it cost? It's been asked of me way back when that, well, you could just, why publish anything at all? You could just put it on the internet for everybody. I'm like, well, that's not the best use of the internet, I think, and that also many of the papers that we publish would never have come to light in a responsible manner to a directed audience without the support. Every group has its own research arm, or in a journal or something. It's where they direct their energies to get to the best possible type of public, right? If you just put it out on the internet for all to float, you'd have people not only stealing each other's ideas, it wouldn't reach people, right, unless you knew about it. And I would dare say that people collect papers rather than reading. So,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. So having it in an attractive format, it just goes with our human sensibilities. It's aesthetics. We want something beautiful and useful in our hands. Yeah. So.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, Brother Adam. It was really great talking to you. Again, Adam Kendall, president of the Philalethes Society. I couldn't be happier to have you here.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks so
very
much,
guys.
Thanks, everyone.